All right, something else now. The disaster management regulations have finally arrived more than 2 weeks after the president announced a national state of disaster. It comes after a cabinet meeting. The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs gazetted the regulations, and the stated objectives of those regulations are to end load shedding, to provide for the connection of new electricity generating capacity, and to allow Eskom to improve plant performance. But some environmental standards have been lowered. To discuss, we're joined by the Green Connection strategic lead, Liz Macdaid. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Macdaid, as always. I think we all knew that a compromise was coming. What do you think of the regulations as they've been laid out?
So I think when you look at those regulations, things like ensuring sufficient energy, ensuring energy efficiency, the objectives of them, you don't need a state of disaster to do them. That's what the government should be doing. I think for us, there's a concern is, as usual, the devil's in the detail, and as they came out today, these are preliminary comments. But what it appears is it allows not just fast tracking, but potential exemption from some of the environmental legislation. So there are two problems with this, and one is the short-termness. The value of environmental assessment is to look at what are the potential long-term health, air pollution, water impacts, so that we don't make bad decisions that we end up regretting further down the line. So what we are doing is taking a very short-termist review if we are going to simply let anything go because we now need to put electricity on the grid, and then later on find that we made really bad decisions. So that's one thing. Fast tracking is one thing, but exemption is a completely different issue. The other issue is that the people of South Africa find themselves in a mess, which is not of their making, and are now being forced to potentially take whatever solution is thrown at them. And public participation is happening generally through environmental impact assessment. So it's the only space where people get a chance to raise their concerns or voice their opinions about a project. So really, for me, what we are seeing is a further demise of democracy and a further sort of autocratic rule to fix a problem that is not of our making. So yes, we all want load shedding to end, but it's not clear how bypassing all these environmental so-called rules, these processes which are already fast-tracked and where people get an opportunity to have their say, is worth it. So I think that would be an overall broad comment that I can see.
So in general, you're concerned that a lot of destruction could happen in the short term that will be hard to reverse?
Well, yes, and we can see that this could happen on the way that they're written. And so now we've got a water problem, in a certain area, but that's not going to stop maybe a very water guzzling technology being thrown in there. And then suddenly everyone goes, oh, wow, we've got no water. Or, oh, the water's been polluted. Whoops. Whereas if we'd taken, a couple of weeks more to actually consider things properly, we would not have made that decision. We'd have gone with an alternative.
Can we talk about a specific example, which is Karpowership, the Turkish company that essentially got the deal to bring the ships to our ports, and they're like mini power stations, and they plug into the grid. There was a block there. The environmental department got involved, and it all went back to the communities, etc. So there's some speculation or some concern that Karpowership, things like that, could be pushed through now. Do you know what these regulations mean for a process like that we've already gone through? And I think the environmental department is still looking at that. What happens now?
So again, this is a off the cuff because I haven't had a chance to study them in depth. But we obviously are concerned about Karpowership. I think what has been clear for the Karpowership is they did not get an environmental authorization because there were a lot of concerns. And one of those concerns revolved around the livelihoods of fishers and other coastal communities due to the potential harm that car park could have over a 20-year period. So if suddenly now we're on a second phase and we're really looking at it, and we still have some serious concerns, and if that's now going to be thrown out the window and they're just going to go for it, then we are literally risking the livelihoods of other people who have no other alternative. And that seems to be completely unfair, if we put it very, very simply. But the other issue is, even if we said car power go tomorrow, we are still in court over the generation license, because in fact, the generation license was issued and we were not able to assess and participate meaningfully in that process because they never gave us the numbers. So we don't know what we're going to pay. And we wanted to know that before we could meaningfully say that's a good idea. So that court case is still ongoing. Then the third thing is, even if all of that is clear, it's not a case of plug and play as quickly as we think, because you still have to build the infrastructure on shore in order to connect them. And then, of course, what we would be saying is, why are we going to do all that if there are better alternatives?
Yeah.
So this raises the risks.
Despite the specifics around Karpowerships, and thank you, I think a lot of people are interested in that. But what I'm saying is, do we know, could this now go through without further consultation, or are there still safeguards in place? Looking at these regulations, can you relate them to that example of Karpowerships?
In my brain, as I look at them, it allows for the condemnation or exemption, which in my head means they could be suddenly exempt from the processes they're currently undergoing. However, I might be wrong because they are already in process, and maybe those rules would apply to a new project coming in that would then be given an exemption.
All right, thank you. So it depends if it's retrospective or not. Well, we continue to follow that specific deal, and perhaps next week we will have a bigger discussion on whether, as a country, we should be climbing into the black gold, coal and gas and things like that, or how do we put up those safeguards around communities, etc., while we do that. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Liz Macdaid, the Green Connection Strategic Lead.